On behalf of your co-host, the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers of Commerce, welcome back to our next forum featuring House District 30. Again, I'm Scott Cope of Enterprise Bank, and as a member of the Olathe Board's Executive Committee, it's my honor to be serving as moderator. For those of you who may not have attended their earlier forum, our format today includes a 3-minute opening statement by each candidate, a moderated question and answer period during which candidates will each have 1.5 minutes to respond, followed at the end by a 2-minute closing statement. Speaking order has been randomly determined with the candidates and will rotate throughout the program. Again, please take a moment to make sure cell phones are silenced, and we'll begin. First, I'll introduce the candidates. House District 30 has both Democrat and Republican primary races, and I'll present candidates alphabetically by party. This district includes portions of Northeast Olathe and South Central Lenexa. Starting with the Democrat primary race. Matthew Calcara, Democratic primary election candidate, attended Shawnee Mission Public Schools before graduating from the University of Southern California. Following a successful professional career in journalism and new media management, he returned home to Kansas, where his time includes volunteering on behalf of a number of political and civic causes. Matthew lives in Olathe. Thank you, Matthew. Brandon Woodard, Democratic primary election candidate, grew up in Topeka and graduated from KU, where he was involved in many campus civic organizations and causes, ultimately serving as student body vice president. He currently works as a fundraiser at KU, advising alumni on how to support the university through philanthropy. Brandon lives in Lenexa. Obviously, that's a challenging word for me. Let's move to the Republican primary race. Primary election candidate Wendy Bingesser was invited to participate in today's forum, but was unable to attend. Colleen Webster? Colleen, thank you. We knew we were going to screw that up. Colleen Webster is a primary Republican candidate, has spent her professional career as a teacher, spending more than 30 years teaching in the Shawnee Mission and Olathe school districts, and most recently at Christ Preparatory and Southland Academies. She's also been active in our community and in her church. She and her husband have 2 grown children and live in Lenexa. Now we'll start with opening statements by each candidate. Again, reminder, each 3 minutes in length. And these have been based on random selection order. So Matthew, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I really appreciate the amazing turnout for a Monday at 3 p.m. So thank you again. My name is Matthew Calcara. I got into this race because I feel like we have big problems and they need big solutions. So I'm not a candidate that's afraid of those big ideas and big solutions. So some of those things that I'm fighting for hardest include free universal pre-K. It's the best investment we can make in our kids, and it's one that we should have made a long time ago, but that we can make now. I'm also working hard to get 2 years of free post-secondary education, whether that's vocational training or community college or public university. It's another amazing investment we can make in our community and our future. So there's a lot of other ideas that I'm working on for the turn the computer on. There's a lot of other ideas that I'm working on for the future of Kansas. Among those include innovations in transportation policy. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make our transportation spending not only more efficient, but smarter, to get ourselves things like public transportation and a cleaner environment through the reduced use of cars. So a little bit about me. I was a digital media manager for companies like Disney, Capital Group, Guthrie Rinker, and a number of small companies that you probably have never heard of. But my long career in business includes about 20 years in the private sector. During that time, I did everything. I worked in industries including media, hospitality, transportation, and a number of others. So my experience in those fields has led me to where I am today. And that is, thank you, that is working hard to make sure that Kansas has the most competent, efficient, effective, and stable government that we can give it. So, in sum, the ideas that I'm pushing for may seem big, may seem kind of impossible sometimes, but that's what they said about a lot of ideas before they actually came to fruition. So I'd like to challenge all of you to think big, dream big, and let's work together for the future of Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from candidate number 2, Brandon.
Thank you, everyone. See, get the mics working. My name is Brandon Woodard. I wanted to thank the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers for sponsoring this event and for all of you for taking time out of your afternoon to ask us questions and hear from us. Like I said, my name is Brandon Woodard. I'm a lifelong Kansan, an advocate for healthcare, education, and fiscal policy for several years, and a proven community leader. I'm running for the Kansas House to give the people of Olathe and Lenexa a real voice in Topeka. Having grown up as a free and reduced lunch student, I know that we must eliminate the sales tax on food. We should not be putting the burden of the state's bills on the backs of our families that are trying to buy food. Having attended KU as a Pell Grant recipient, I know that we must invest in public K-12 and public higher education here in Kansas. I believe that public education gives our young Kansans the foundation from which they are given the opportunity to lead a meaningful life. And as a former healthcare revenue worker, I know that we have to expand Medicaid to make access to quality, affordable healthcare possible for all Kansans. Expanded healthcare coverage reduces uncompensated care at our physician clinics and our hospitals, which makes healthcare cheaper for all Kansans. I currently work as a higher education fundraiser for the University of Kansas at KU Endowment Association, both in Lawrence and Kansas City, Kansas. And I work with our alumni in the Kansas City metro region and across the country to connect their philanthropic interests with the needs of the university. After the millions of dollars of cuts to higher education over the last 10 years, trust me, there are many needs that our universities have. So every day I'm working to make college more affordable for our students and also creating real-world opportunities for them both in and out of the classroom along the way. I'm running because my neighbors, community leaders, friends, and family asked me to. Olathe and Lenexa deserve an accessible, responsive leader representing them in Topeka, which they've not had for the last 4 years. I've been present, attending the rare town hall that our outgoing state representative would choose to show up at for over 3 years, and I'm the only candidate in this district that voters chose to put on their August ballot, having filed for office by petition with 4 times the required signatures to get on the ballot. I chose to move to Lenexa over 3 years ago because of the opportunity. Jobs, schools for hopefully a future family, great parks and trails, and access to transportation. My campaign believes that when we work together, we can create a stronger Kansas. When I'm in Topeka, I look forward to working with the people of Olathe and Lenexa, community leaders, and all of you to create a stronger Kansas. Thank you so much, and again, my name is Brandon Woodard, running for Kansas House District 30.
Now we'll move on to candidate 3, Colleen.
Thank you very much to both the Olathe and Lenexa Chambers for hosting this event. Blake Schreck, Tim McKee, and all your staff. My parents were small business owners, so I know how important the chamber is to business. And I've attended both sets of meetings, and I see how powerful your chambers are and what you're doing to help promote our cities. I'm so proud to be a part of both communities. I've been here a long time, and I've seen the growth, but yet the restoration and the fact that we've kept our history, and it makes me so happy. Today, my opponent is not here today, and I'm disappointed in that. And people talk a lot about transparency in government. Well, this is being transparent, and this is being invisible. So I'd like to talk to you and tell you a little bit about myself. I am older, and I've been married 38 years to the same gentleman, Dave, my husband. We have 2 grown sons, 1 beautiful daughter-in-law, and we have our first grandbaby, Kinsley, almost 6 months old, born and raised like Grandma in Kansas, but I hope she can continue to be raised in Kansas. I want our state to be in the black, doing the right thing for people, and being a success story, not being laughed about on the national media. So that's why I'm running. She's one of the major reasons I'm running. Today you're going to ask some tough questions, and I'm going to tell you where I am right now in the process after attending many forums and seminars and symposiums on both with very contrasting opinions and ideas. Pardon me. I love to go to those forums, get the materials, come home, compare and contrast the data, check the sources of these pie charts and datas, and really look at the information. So I'm trying to get all perspectives. I can't tell you, though, how I will vote today. I'll have to attend the hearings, I'll have to read the bills, I'll have to really look at the language of the bills, talk to my district. That is what true representation is. We have not had it for 4 years. No one sent me a survey, a questionnaire, no one's knocked on my door. I went to Topeka, I was unable to find the incumbent. I will be present. I will answer your emails. I will be responsive. I will be listening. I will be learning. I think I'm the most qualified because I have 4 decades of friends in the area, in our district, in all careers, banking, small business, healthcare, corporate, and I can call on them as well as the people in the chamber and my district. Thank you for today.
Thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to the moderated question and answer portion of this segment. As a reminder, candidates, you will each have 1.5 minutes to respond, and the speaking order will rotate with each question. Question number 1 will be in this order: Candidate 2, Candidate 3, Candidate 1. First question: what are your views on state tax policy? Candidate 2.
I support a fair and balanced and predictable tax policy in Kansas, one that we have not had over the last 8 years, given the administration and the incumbent, the outgoing state representative, has been supportive of a tax policy that I believe does not work for Kansas. I believe that we used to have one of the more progressive tax structures in the country, and we have walked away from that. I support an additional tax bracket for single earners making $500,000 a year or more, or couples making $1 million a year or more, which I think would pay for a lot of the exciting, bold ideas we have in this campaign. And I also believe that we should reduce the sales tax on food, getting to elimination of sales tax on food, since we're currently paying the highest grocery tax in the country.
Candidate number 3.
Well, I also believe our food tax is so unjust and so unfair. It needs to be dialed down a notch. We could replace that revenue with taxing our out-of-state internet purchases, and I hope we enact that very quickly. It hurts our retail business. I've been working in retail since I retired from teaching, and our retail stores are becoming show houses for Amazon, and it's just not right and fair. They need to be paying their fair share of taxes. You know, we've dug a big hole in this state, and for 7 years we've just depleted all our funds, and so it's going to take us a little time to get back on our feet again. I know June was beyond our expectations, and that's great, but we have to look and see what these trade embargoes are going to do for our agricultural part of our state. We must be very vigilant, cautious when we're talking about taxes. I would love to get sport gaming revenues here, and I would like to cap that property tax for seniors so that they could stay in their homes and the tax difference would be paid upon the sale of the home.
Candidate 1.
So the pernicious thing about the Brownback experiment was that it collapsed all of the state income tax bands so that, in effect, working class and middle class Kansans are paying the same tax rate as the wealthiest Koch brothers. So what we need to do is expand our conception of the income tax bands so that it's more of a progressive step system where higher earners end up paying more than as a percentage of their income than working class folks. So you may have heard of taxes being referred to as a three-legged stool, where there's income taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes as a leg of each of those, as the 3 legs on the stool. Right now, we have sales taxes doing far more of the work than they should be. Sales taxes are regressive. We need to get rid of them not only on food, but on the essentials of life. So that would include things like hygiene products and toiletries. Those would include the everyday essentials of life. So in doing so, we can basically give a tax cut to the people who need it most, working class and middle class Kansans, and that's who I'll focus on in terms of tax policy.
We're going to now move on to question number 2. The order will be candidate 3, candidate 1, candidate 2. Here's the question. With record low unemployment rates challenging businesses' ability to find enough employees, what would you do to grow and develop the state's workforce?
Well, I just met the mayor of Olathe Saturday night at one of the free concerts, and I talked to him about this. And he said the number one thing is to keep our public schools funded and of high quality. And he pointed to a lady right next to him and he said, "Look, she moved here because of the schools." So here's our mayor saying this. He also mentioned to me his second concern was that another one of our funds that, one of our departments that got their funds depleted was the Kansas Department of Commerce. And he said, we've got to build that back up. He said, they have been a wonderful resource, but they're completely depleted and they can't help us. We have so many things we want to do and they're not there. The money's not there. So I think, you know, it's the same old song and dance. Companies will come here if our schools are stellar. Lenexa just got Geico, and I'm sure Geico looked at our quality of life, but number one in that is public schools. Our schools are working really closely with our education sources, emphasis on STEM, biotech, medical, and culinary are just a few examples of VOTEC getting our students ready for our workforce in Johnson County.
Candidate 1.
One problem with the state commerce department and one problem with choosing establishment candidates sometimes is that the reason the state's commerce department's funds were depleted was our previous chair of the state commerce department was found to be, let's just say, taking some liberties with what his funding should be doing and passing contracts to basically his cronies. So I would contest the idea that the State Department of Commerce would be a good investment of our money. Frankly, schools should be our number one priority because those are what develop the workforce for tomorrow. Investing in pre-K and post-secondary education are the best investments we can make in our state, and that's what we should be focusing on. In addition, creating a welcoming climate and pushing back against a climate of fear that has been engendered by the Brownback administration against people of color, immigrants, and the gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender community would be an excellent start. Thank you.
Candidate 2.
I think we absolutely have to increase our investments in public education, not just K-12, but also higher education. As a higher education fundraiser, I do this every day. I work with our very successful alumni that are usually executives in their company, and having such a focus on our Kansas City metro region, I've been able to look at ways that not only can we utilize their philanthropic, resources to make meaningful change at KU, but also looking at what are you doing to recruit students? How can we as a university, how can our higher education institutions meet that recipe for employability? What are you looking for? And we are at a time where our state and our higher education institutions and universities haven't always done that. So seeing that they are wanting to respond to meet the needs of the workplace is very exciting. But we also have to invest in our vocational and technical programs. My brother is a boiler operator. My dad was a truck driver. My mom's an office manager. I took the college route, and we've all been successful in our own ways. And so investing in public education creates the future workforce of Kansas, and we have a real shot of doing it if we invest.
Now we'll move on to question number 3. The order this time will be candidate 1, candidate 2, and then candidate 3. The question: Topeka as a whole appears poised to refocus on the state's infrastructure. What would your priorities be in any new statewide transportation plan? Candidate 1.
So I could talk your ear off about transportation. I spent 8 years working in transportation and travel policy. But what I'm going to do is just explain a couple of quick ideas that I had about how we can make our state's transportation funding more efficient and more effective. So in the 30th district, we have the 435, I-35, and K-10 interchange, right? It seems like it's been under construction for roughly forever. One of the reasons that that is because in other countries, they put things into their contracts like for construction companies who are charged with, who get the contract for the roads. If they shut down a lane of traffic, for example, there's written into the contract a small financial penalty. And what this does is it incentivizes construction companies that maintain our roads to not disrupt traffic, to not disrupt our lives. And it's amazing that construction companies are happy to do this because if they know that it's coming, they can definitely plan around it. So small, simple innovations like this can really make a difference in people's lives. I'd also like to, once we get KDOT funding from once we stop the sweeps that have basically devastated KDOT funding, I'd like to pursue not only maintaining our roads, going back to a 6-year road replacement schedule from the current 50-year road replacement schedule, thanks to the Brownback administration, that I'd like to pursue public transportation and mass transit solutions because I believe those can reduce pollution and effectively move us towards the future. Thanks.
Candidate number 2.
So in Kansas, we don't have oceans or mountains, so people come here for good jobs and stay for our good schools. The majority of the people in our district in House 30 don't work in the district, so they rely on our major highways that pass through the district to get to their jobs, get to school, their places of worship, things like that. So we have to invest in that infrastructure. Looking at the future of our state, we have to make sure that we have the good roads and bridges so that people aren't complaining all the time. I've had several people at the door that say that they feel like they're getting their wheels realigned every time they go in for an oil change because of driving on 435. So we have to change that. I also think that we have to, looking forward at with this new transportation task force, make sure that we are preserving the funding for our roads, making sure that we're not using that money for anything else, and making sure that we have representation from Johnson County and Wyandotte County on that task force to ensure that we have representation going forward regarding transportation.
Candidate number 3.
Yes, our number one priority in District 30 is that K-10 expansion. We've added some safety provisions there, and we've noticed the difference. We have not had the fatality since they added some safety features, but it is very well traveled if you know that. And we do offer some public transportation that students are able to take from KU's campus to Johnson County. So, and I'm sure we'll see more of that public transportation increasing, and that's a good thing. So that's one of our projects, that's one of our desires that we would like to see done in District 30, but the problem is there are projects that throughout the state. And so we're going to have to prioritize. We can't do everything. We don't have money just flying from the sky. So it's just like our households or businesses. You have to prioritize. We'll all be fighting for our particular projects. The task force will give us the information we need, and they will make suggestions on how to fund it. But again, everything takes funding. I don't want to raise taxes. I think our taxes are very high, but we have to make these things happen. We have to be creative and come up with other resources and figure out how we're going to finance these projects because they do attract business and they do help us.
Now we'll move on to question number 4. The order will be candidate 2, candidate 3, candidate 1. The question: what are your views on funding K-12 education? Candidate 2.
As a proud graduate of a public K-12 education in Kansas and a public higher education in Kansas, I believe that you must invest in public K-12 schools. That's the foundation that gives everyone that opportunity to be on an equitable footing as their classmates. And funding K-12 schools is not just, adding more money. We have to make sure that we're funding them equitably and adequately. Even here in District 30, we see differences between the Olathe Public School System and Shawnee Mission School District. So making sure that we have a fair and balanced school funding plan will help both school districts. I also think that we have to make sure that we have the resources for counseling and psychological services, nurses, paraprofessionals, and the things that make sure that every student has an equal opportunity to succeed in our Kansas public K-12 schools.
Candidate 3.
I am so pleased that the Kansas Supreme Court did find the bill that was provided to them, that it was adequate and equal, and that we do need to add the inflationary rate for the next 5 years. But I was very pleased to know that our public schools will be open this fall. And since I've been in education 33 years, I've been through all the ups and downs of budgeting, and I've heard administrators year after year after year, starting with about 1992, well, we don't know if we're going to be able to hire, we don't know what our budget's going to be next year, we're going to wait to see what the legislature does. But this time, it was just too close for comfort. It's just ridiculous that our state doesn't want to fund public education. And I really think there's an agenda out there to bring public schools down, to underfund them and say then, well, they're not successful, look. And I think there's a big push for vouchers, and I think if you believe in public schools and what this country was built on, you will fight against that. Thank you very much.
Candidate 1.
Somehow we've gotten to a place where the left, liberals, whatever you want to call them, have started to argue for the constitutional minimum of funding. And folks on the right seem to argue for less than our constitutional minimum of funding. I think this is a broken paradigm. What we need to be talking about is how we can make targeted investments in our schools to make them world-class. Because ultimately that's what's going to make our area successful, is if we do have world-class schools that can attract businesses and new residents. The legislature commissioned a study that the ultra-conservative members backed. This study found that Kansas schools were operating at heroic levels of efficiency. It was among the most efficient school systems that the particular consultant had ever studied. So I think what we need to be talking about is not, do we fund schools to the constitutional minimum, but what sort of investments can we be making in order to make our schools the best? Because I think that should be ultimately what our goal is getting world-class schools so that every Kansas kid has a world-class education. And that's what I'd like to fight for.
Now we'll move to question number 5. The order will be candidate 3, candidate 1, candidate 2. Question 5 has 2 parts. Describe what you see as the Kansas advantage when it comes to economic development and tourism, and the types of economic development policies you would support to encourage job growth and business expansion in Kansas.
Well, as someone mentioned earlier today, we do not have mountains, and we do not have beaches, and we do not have 75-degree weather year-round with no humidity. So we have to sell something else, and it's our quality of life. And within that quality of life is our public schools. I really believe it's number one. I was told by the mayor, and the mayor has to be right. So it's just so true. And I'm sure you people in the chamber have had that discussion many times. When the schools are strong, people want to relocate bring their company to our area. And they study our schools, they look at our facilities, they look at our test scores, they look at your National Merit Scholars, and they see how you do on standardized tests, and they make some decisions based upon that. We really have a wonderful place here, and we could sell it much more. We're in the central part of the United States. We're halfway between Mexico and Canada, the east and west coast. We should be the hub of every national corporation. We just need to get out there and actively sell Kansas.
Candidate 1.
I believe our economic development professionals have been doing a pretty good job of selling Kansas. The problem is that in selling Kansas, they're selling, in some ways, these days, a flawed product. So one of the problems that Kansas faces is the border war. Many of you might be aware of the border war, not the Bleeding Kansas style one, but the one today where we basically incentivize companies to just hop across the state line for giant tax breaks. Ultimately, this undermines our local tax base and results in cuts to funding for schools and other important public services. So I think one of the things that we need to do is work with our friends in the Missouri legislature to get a comprehensive agreement on economic development incentives in the basically greater Kansas City region. This will allow us to both attract businesses from outside the region as well as prevent them from just hopping across the state line to get tax breaks that they frankly don't need. So in the other part of the question was basically, how do we sell Kansas? And that is, do what we're good at. Good schools, competent, clean government. And yeah, we don't have mountains or perfect weather, but we've got people who are educated, smart, friendly, and welcoming. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
Candidate 2.
Love it when people use my phrases. For the the Kansas advantage, I see, again, because of where we're at, public schools and public education being a real engine and a real power that we have here in Kansas. I think that when it comes to economic incentives, I agree we have to make sure that we are stopping the jobs jumping back and forth across state line, but making sure that we are incentivizing businesses to come here to create net new jobs, so that we are creating new jobs for the Kansas City metro area and not just hopping back and forth between the border. I think that investments in public education and higher ed also allow us to make sure that the higher education institutions are meeting the demands of our workforce. The Greater Kansas City Civic Council has been saying for years what they're looking for from our higher ed institutions, and we're now hitting their 2020 mark and just now getting there on some of these data-driven and different skill sets that they're looking for. Of course, STEM and everything else like that, but what we see in a lot of our companies in Kansas City area is that those humanities and liberal arts and sciences core classes are really great preparation for the workplace when you pair it with business or other technical education.
Now move on to question number 6. The order will be candidate 1, candidate 2, candidate 3. The question: what is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponents in this race? Candidate 1.
I think one of the most distinguishing things about my background is my long experience in the private sector. So I've had a variety of private sector jobs of varying levels, from the lowest of the low to, well, not high, but middle management, I suppose, might be a way to say that. In addition, I've had experience outside the state. And while a lot of folks might say that I've not been a lifelong Kansan, I think this experience gives me crucial insights that will help all of us in attracting businesses and residents from outside the state. I know what we're up against, and I know what Kansas has that other places don't. You see, when you leave the state for a little while, it's funny that you become even more Kansan than you might have once been, because you're defending the state among its detractors, or at least people who know nothing about it. So I think what distinguishes me is both my business experience, my life experience in terms of both having been born and raised here, having left for a little while, and then coming back, because I think those are the types of highly educated millennial folks who may have left the state that we need to get back, that will really boost our economy, and in terms of workforce development would be a great asset to have.
Candidate number 2.
Focusing on the primary election, I think that the points that distinguish me the most is that I am a lifelong Kansan, a coalition builder that's been in Lenexa for 3 years, in the district for 3 years, but before that, having worked on school board and city council races for people I believed in my hometown of Topeka, later in Lawrence, and now in Johnson County. I believe that I am the candidate that has the temperament and poise that it's going to take and that is required to work in Topeka, to build consensus, to work with people in your own caucus, but both flavors of the other side of the aisle, to make sure that we're getting some of these things done. The reality in Kansas is that you have to come together and bring together different ideologies to get big, bold solutions passed. You have to get to 63 votes in Topeka, and I know that I'm the candidate that can do that if we win come November.
Candidate 3.
Well, what distinguishes me is I'm here. So that's how I'll be in Topeka. I'll be present, I'll be engaged, I will listen, I will respond to your emails. It's really not a hard job. I will be here, and I am here today. And I know my community and my people. I've lived it. I've been in Johnson County since 1981. I've been in the people of Kansas business. I've been a teacher, and I've met so many parents and students. Now they're grown adults, they're taxpayers, and I've heard their concerns over the years, and I know their struggles and their joys. I've sat on the bleachers with people from all walks of life, played bunco. I've just been in the community. I've been active. I've been engaged. I've been in PTA, the whole parenting thing. So I just feel like I know this community. I've been here the longest, so I think I'm the most uniquely qualified, and I'm a great learner and I have a great love of people.
We'll now move on to the closing statements by each candidate. As a reminder, candidates, you will each have 2 minutes to present a closing statement, and we're going to go in reverse order than when we did our opening statements. Candidate 3.
Dave and I, we bought our first house in Olathe in 1981 in the north part of the city. We moved to Lenexa in 1986. I've been an educator for 33 years. I'm still teaching today. I am not a politician, but I just got frustrated with all the diminishing funds and the state that our state was in. If you approve of the Brownback policies, then I'm not your candidate. I will not be told how to vote like Wendy will be. I just want our state to run like our businesses and our households run. Common sense. You don't spend more than you have. You have a budget. It's not difficult. In 2016, we saw a wave of moderates get elected, and they have created a very positive shift in Topeka, and it's affected our state so greatly, and it's helping put our state back on its feet. Let's continue that positive trend. Please vote for me, Colleen Webster, August 7th. You know, there's an old saying, and I think it applies here, I will not be intimidated by Topeka. I teach high school, so you can't scare me. Thank you.
Candidate 2.
Well, I just want to thank the Lenexa and Olathe Chambers again for hosting this forum. It's such a great opportunity, and unfortunately one of the other candidates couldn't make it or didn't want to. And so I'll close with just saying that while I have not been in Lenexa for decades, I chose to come to this part of the state. Growing up in Topeka, going to school in Lawrence, and coming here, knowing that I wanted to stay in Kansas, I didn't like what was happening in Topeka, so I've done my best to be part of the fight, be part of standing up for what I believe in and what people like me believe in. I was very proud to co-found the Johnson County Young Democrats, the state's largest and most active chapter. We wanted to turn people's energy into action in a meaningful way to create dialogue and teach them how to meet with their elected officials, how to make their voice heard in a way that's productive. And, you know, for me as a candidate, I'm very proud to be a lifelong Kansan. I was born in Kansas, raised here, educated here, have been working and paying taxes here for 10 years, and I'm not going anywhere. So we're very excited in our campaign to be endorsed by KNEA, Ed First Shawnee Mission, the Kansas Young Democrats, KC BizPAC, and a number of other organizations. We are the consensus-building Democrat that can win in November. And so I will just ask for your vote this upcoming Tuesday, August 7th. And if you'd like to learn more about our campaign, you can go to woodardforkansas.com. Thank you.
Candidate number 1.
So when it comes to thinking big, there's one part of the puzzle that we haven't quite solved. And that is Kansas Democrats, moderate and progressive alike, have often failed to do one thing, and that is articulate a strong progressive vision for the community. Often they'll compromise before even getting to the table. And that's not what we need to do. We need to compromise when it's the time for compromise. So what I'd like to do is invest in public education, invest in transportation innovation, push forward with transparency and clean government, and most of all, I'd like to think big. Because our problems are too big to think small ball anymore. We need to push forward with solutions that will solve the pressing issues of our time. And that's what I'd like to do. So if you go to MatthewCalcara.com, That's CALCARA, which I think you can read right there. I articulate a lot of the ideas in more depth. So if you'd like to learn more about any of the things that I've been talking about, please go to MatthewCalcara.com. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. This is an amazing turnout for a Monday afternoon. So thank you all so much for being engaged in your community. It really makes a difference, and thank you so much.
That concludes our forum for House District 30. Let's thank our candidates for participating in our program. We'll now take a short intermission before reconvening for our final forum featuring House District 14.